We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's Grad Talks. My name is Alejandra Arguelles. My pronouns are she, her, hers. As a reminder, we do encourage you to be active in the Q&A as well as the chat, which is open. This webinar will be recorded, and today's Grad Talks is focused on job hunting in the age of COVID-19. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to our panelists to introduce themselves.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm pleased to see some familiar names in the participants pane, so welcome. And to those that don't know, also happy to have you here. My name is Rachel, and I'm a PhD candidate in mechanical and aerospace engineering. And I'm joined today by my friend and colleague, Audrey Velasco-Hogan, also a PhD candidate in material science. And we're here to tell you a little bit of our stories and some of the tips we have for job hunting in the age of COVID-19. So first, a little bit about us. Like I said, PhD candidate. I'm in the Myers lab as a mechanical engineer. I was heavily involved in the Gordon Engineering Leadership Center when that was around. Hopefully it'll make a comeback. I also served as GSA, or GPSA as they're now branded, president last year, and I just accepted a job offer at Northrop Grumman in their future technical leadership program. So once I wrap up this PhD, I'm on my way out the door to Northrop. Audrey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Audrey. I'm also in the Myers group, kind of a different subset and field, but material science and engineering program. I have also, like Rachel, have really taken advantage of a lot of the leadership and mentorship opportunities available to UCSD. And I think that that was, a pretty integral approach to leveraging my skills during my job application. And I have accepted an offer at Intel for processing engineer.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I feel like when I was invited to do this talk, I was like, I can't really do this without Audrey, because Audrey is kind of like my sounding board and gives me a lot of great advice. So I was like, why don't I just bring my own advisor with me, right? So I like the point that Audrey just made as a transition as far as taking advantage of resources on campus. Sometimes I felt like I was goofing off during my PhD, but as it turns out, there were a lot of amazing skills that we got out of it. And so the first part of this whole adventure is that you really want to take inventory of your skills. So I kind of broke this down into 3 ways. First, you have your research field. So for me, that's shock physics, atomistic simulations. There's some Python, C++ kind of playing that I've done. But for the most part, I kind of know what my rabbit holes are. Then you can transition to what skills you've learned formally. So I've taken a Python intro course. I have taken whole classes on CAD as a mechanical engineer. And then from that, you can move on to things that you've acquired in order to successfully perform research. Maybe skills that you've performed extracurricularly, so in leadership programs, running clubs. I know one really cool thing I know Audrey did was she organized seminars in our department, actually within the whole Jacobs School, for graduate students to talk and for people to come and learn about some of the research that grads were doing. That was really cool. Audrey, do you have anything you want to add?
Yes, so I think you have some notes down here about choosing whether or not you want to stay in your current field. And I would kind of just like to put it out there that don't feel limited by what field you're in, or specifically what research you are doing. So I'm doing research right now on teeth and feathers, and that's completely unrelated in the grand general scope of the project to what they're doing at Intel, right? But I mean, you're here in your respective graduate program to obtain kind of this general skill set and knowledge that will then be applicable for many different applications, right? So I guess just don't limit yourself. Oftentimes, when you're coming from a university in a related program like material science or MAE, the recruiters and the people that you're applying for have a general understanding of what it is that you have learned from those programs as well.
Yeah, and so to speak to some of the notes down here, I think when you're taking inventory of your skills, you kind of can get creative with it a little bit. Like when you're considering these things, what extra things have you done, and did you find that you enjoyed? I found that I enjoyed leadership more than I enjoyed doing material science. And that just kind of is what it is. So I also wanted to note that as you're on your adventure, maybe think about things if you're early in your job hunt that you wish that you got to try or do before you graduate, and do you have time to do them? Do you have time to join some sort of incubator and be in a project to launch some sort of crazy awesome product off the ground? Do you wish that you had time to take a C++ class? You can do those things and see if that helps build your skill set. And so I guess with that, that kind of brings us to this idea of starting your search early and looking at, the jobs that excite you, what bores you, what fits into your 5-year vision for yourself. I know some people kind of cringe at, having to do these big reflection bits in your life, but I think it actually really helps to think about where you see yourself in 5 to 10 years and, how your graduate degree paves the way for that. One thing is if you search for jobs early, then you can kind of also see what goals you can set for yourself. So searching early helps you see what's out there. It helps you see where you might want to go. And then you can also see, hey, I wish that, I really love this one field, but I really need to get good at, I feel like I need to be really good at SolidWorks before I graduate so I can use that on my resume. And so you end up with this feedback loop here on the right where you have positions that interest you and you kind of have an idea of what employers are looking for, and sort of feeding into how you can frame your skill set to fit the roles you're interested in. I do this ton of bash scripting and Unix stuff, and it was shocking to me when I saw whole jobs who wanted PhDs who focused on that. So that feedback loop is pretty important and pretty useful for figuring out what directions you need to go in. Audrey?
Yeah, so just on another note of starting your search early, I think most typically for PhD students, you want to start at least 6 months in advance. And I will also say that most people that hire a lot of relatively or recently graduated PhD students are also pretty flexible with the start date, and knowing that your defense can kind of be up in the air plus or minus a few months, right? So don't feel limited, or don't feel like you're starting too early, because I mean, maybe a year is too early to start, but there's a lot of flexibility with employers as well with start dates.
Yeah, I almost feel like I started looking for fun a couple years early just to see, but I didn't really start applying until 6 months before I thought I was going to get out.
Yeah, that's a good distinction between searching and applying, right? So always keep the search going, right? I mean, maybe don't distract yourself too much with searching for jobs, but definitely start applying at least 6 months before you expect to graduate.
The distraction thing is super important. I'm a big dreamer, so I love looking into and seeing what's in the world. In the meantime, if you're maybe not necessarily ready to apply, or when you're trying to figure out what to do to apply, totally work on your CV and your resume. And I think having an online presence these days goes pretty far for a couple of reasons. First, it's easy for people to find out a little bit about you, see who you are and what you're about. And it also helped me a lot to see who I was talking to, especially in the age of COVID-19, where, you don't really go into an office and get to have a kind of a personal interaction with someone right now. But going in and seeing what someone's research has been about in ResearchGate, for example, was really helpful for me to go into the interview and go into some of my other hiring processes, and kind of know who I'm talking to. Is this person technical staff? Is this person in HR? Those things aren't necessarily always clear, but it's nice to know, because I don't think someone in HR is not going to understand the minutia of my degree the same way that someone who is technical is going to understand that. And it kind of is what it is. As you can see here on the left, Audrey and I put the front pages of our CVs here, and I just want to point out how they're the same and different in a few ways. They're the same in that the format is straightforward. You want to use fonts and designs that that software screening software can easily decipher. And the order that you put your stuff in is kind of really up to you. It's up to what feels most important to you. I put my education last. Sometimes I put it first. If I was applying to academia, I would probably put it first. But I put my research and my publications up top. Audrey has a skills section. I don't. But either way, it's helpful because you wanna, with a CV, the length is not as strict. So if you have the chance to submit your CV, you kind of have more of an opportunity to buzz the software if the company you're applying to uses it. But otherwise, I mean, for a resume, a strict formal resume, I think they say no more than 600 words to a page. So I don't know. Audrey, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I know that there's whole topics on how to design a CV, right? So maybe we won't go too far into details, but just a couple of takeaways are just, making it super readable, and even sometimes just tailoring your CV or your resume to the job application itself, right? So oftentimes, I mean, there'll be skills in the application title, right? And if you have those skills, those should be directly related onto your resume or your CV. And sometimes even just mirroring the same language that they use in the application and putting that on your resume makes it super obvious that you are a good fit for this position, right? Like, and another really good point I think Rachel brought up earlier is that typically the first people that see your resume are HR, right? So they can't really have a high level approach to translate one skill to this job position, right? So that's kind of your job. You have to like put it out there and say, I have done XYZ, and I think this translates to ABC type of thing. So don't ever think that they're gonna, I guess, critically analyze your CV to see if it can translate to the job. So you kind of have to do that job yourself. Just a note on LinkedIn, during my interview, my interview actually made some comments on some things that were on my LinkedIn, and I didn't really realize that they were gonna like look into my LinkedIn before the interview. So make sure that that's updated and that whatever's on your LinkedIn is something that you're prepared to talk about.
Yeah, I found LinkedIn's a pretty interesting tool because if it's not there, I don't feel like anybody's really missing it. But if it is there, you do have another opportunity to paint a picture of yourself and what you offer. I also tried LinkedIn Premium they have a trial. I don't really feel like it was necessary per se, but it was interesting to see because I also, at the same time that I was using LinkedIn Premium, you can put ready for work on there. And so there's a little profile thing where it tells people that you're looking for a job. And I could see how many more hits that my page was getting at the time, which I think was useful and interesting. I also found on LinkedIn when I put that I was looking for work, I had a lot of people contacting me, probably like one or two associates a week. People in my network, we'll kind of talk about this more, which was also really useful. The other things like Facebook, Instagram, if you have a lab website, any media releases, or if you have a personal website, same thing as what Audrey was talking about with LinkedIn. You want to make sure that your online presence, you're aware of your online presence, and it is going to be okay for an employer to see. And if not, I mean, maybe you set your things to private, but they do look. It is not uncommon these days, and it's easier than ever these days to find that information. The flip side is if you're doing a good job, then those things can, I think, really help you, but don't let it be a hindrance either. So that kind of segues into our next thing, which is exercising your network. I think you have these sort of levels and these circles around you of different types of people. So I guess your most immediate people are your advisor, your PI, your research group, and the people that you sort of interact with every day. And even just word of mouth, like, hey, I heard there was an opportunity at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories. That is hugely beneficial for people in your research group, or it could even be something, a way that you learn about a job. Um, from there, you can also exercise your connections with your collaborators. Um, Knowing that I collaborate with someone at Los Alamos National Laboratory, and people who know my collaborator are very willing to connect with me and support me, because it helps my collaborator quite a bit. Outside of that, maybe people who don't know your technical work as well, but who know you. You have your peers, your classmates, your teammates, people who you might have done group projects with, people that you see in passing, every day or every Zoom now, right? It's a little bit less fun than it used to be. And then you also have your campus resources. So the Idea Center, the Career Center. I know if you go in, make an appointment with Julia Hoffman, she has connected me to several people. Even she'll think of people who also went to Northrop Grumman, and every so often, because she knows that I'm going to Northrop Grumman, she'll connect us. And prior to that, she was recommending, I talked to a couple other people who'd gone through the hiring process as well. And networking is not all awkward small talk. Maybe like when you're at a conference and you sit down at the table with some random people, the first thing is kind of small talk, and that's how you sort of start the conversation. But it's not this traditional idea where you kind of have to go around a cocktail mixer and just like try to give your elevator pitch to every single person. You kind of want to balance this idea of selling yourself in your elevator pitch with also genuine interest in who you're meeting. Kind of remember that through the job search process, it's not just about getting a job, right? Sometimes we get into the mindset of like, oh, I'll literally take any job. You also maybe want to, if you can, be a little bit, selective and see if who you're talking to is involved in something that you want to be involved in. And if they are and you're not ready, you can always save that for later. I kind of talked about leveraging shared contacts. And then the last thing before I hand it off to Audrey is doing informational interviews. It's statistically shown, I forgot the number, but after about 10 to 12 informational interviews with people, you're pretty likely to have landed a job offer by then. And informational interviews can be a number of things. I set up an informational interview with the vice president of General Atomics. I didn't get an offer there, but that did lead me to talk to 3 managers in material science there, and the project that they needed support on just didn't fit what I wanted to do next. It was too much of the same of what I've been doing. But I had those informational interviews, gave me a great flavor of what that company was looking for, and it also gave me some insider information about they were potentially going on a hiring freeze. So all of those things sort of snowball. The flip side is I just go on LinkedIn sometimes, and if someone works somewhere that I like, I'll ask them about it. Like, hey, what's your experience like? How do you like it? And gathering that information is just hugely helpful. And then those people are also aware, oh yeah, I know someone who could be interested in this someday. Really only takes one good connection to help. And I think Audrey can probably speak more to that as well.
Yeah, so I actually really didn't apply to that many jobs. I applied to maybe about 20, which were just through, just like through Handshake and through just those online portals where you just submit your resume. And I I never got an interview by doing it that way. And what I really found was super helpful was having an established connection from a prior classmate and teammate that really helped to push my resume forward into the process. So I actually had a really great opportunity with someone that I had worked in the past. And, I think that building those connections and especially building that respect. I think we like worked well together and told him that I was interested in Intel, and he actually submitted my resume through kind of the referral program there. And that was super crucial in order for allowing me to have an interview. And then, yeah, I will probably talk more about the interview process later, but really, I think, yeah, having a really good network. I think now is still a good time, even though it's COVID, just check in with your friends that have graduated, just kind of, I mean, still like be friendly, right? Don't maybe just straightforward up ask them to refer your resume, but just make sure that you're keeping your contacts with people.
Yeah, I definitely think it helps. And the flip side is though, like let's say you worked on a project 4 years ago with somebody and you haven't really talked to them since then. I still sometimes will like Snapchat some of my group projects from undergrad and those teammates every now and then, and just keeping that connection alive. I mean, everyone's still happy to hear, from me, happy to hear from each other. So even if it's like, well, I'm worried that my connection is dead, there's nothing wrong with reaching out just to say, hey, how's it going? How are, what are you pursuing now and how's it going? Especially if they're at a place that you're interested in, you can sort of personably segue into asking a couple casual questions. So don't be afraid.
Yes, definitely don't be afraid. And that's a really good way to kind of start the conversation is like, oh, I see that you're working at X and in this position. Do you think we can have time to have a chat about your experience? I'm interested. And people are always more than happy to help. So I think that's a really good segue into it.
Yeah, I generally find that people are really inclined to give support to one another, which is pretty nice. No one's out here like, oh, I can't let that person get this job. I can't wrap my head around that. I also wanted to speak a little bit more. I touched on the informational interview before, but and it can be as simple as connecting with a previous lab mate just to ask about their experience. Other times, it can be with someone who's high up, friend of a friend, I mean, it happens a variety of ways, but it really does help you learn about the different perspectives people have on their experiences, especially if you can get something where you talk to somebody who is a manager and then you talk to somebody who just joined and kind of seeing what the disparity between their experiences are kind of helps you, it can help you figure out is this something I would aspire to? Is this something that I can see myself doing for at least a year, for at least 5 years? And kind of helps you carve your own career path too. I also kind of think you want to familiarize yourself with that field or that career's typical hiring practices and expectations, which is a good thing that you can get out of the informational interview, right? It's a no pressure situation to figure out, is this a good fit for me, before you go through the process of submitting your resume. And then also, you submit the resume and then you have to fill out the application too, which is so fun. We love doing that. But before you go through the trouble of tuning your resume, writing your cover letter, the informational interview is a really good way to figure out if you want to do that. And again, it's just about remember that you get to be selective and get to figure out if this is a good role for you. You don't have to take the first and only offer you get. You can be choosy.
Yeah, I think you really kind of highlighted the power of the informational interview. Not much more that I can really add to that, but yeah, it's very helpful. And I think that UCSD, I think, does actually a pretty good job about initiating these as well. I know that through, I think even the Idea Center, maybe like Intel, Northrop Grumman, they come to the UCSD campus. They've even had online informational interview or kind of seminars. And that's a really good point to then meet a point of contact. I know I was also interested in the Northrop Grumman FTL program, and I had only heard about it through UCSD. So having that opportunity is really crucial.
I heard about the Northrop Grumman program through Audrey. So having the strength of the network really, having a good network has really helped me go far. And just if you feel like, oh, I'm shy, I don't know, that's a lot, that sounds stressful. It can do a lot now, and it'll also do a lot later, especially if you ever want to make lateral moves and stuff. Um, so yeah, we can move on to the fun part.
Oh,
Apply.
so Rachel, I think we do have a question from Sebastian about how do you go about getting an informational interview, checking LinkedIn to see if any alumni work at a company you might be interested in.
Yeah. Do you want to speak to that, or do you want me to start?
You can start.
Okay. It can go both ways. Sometimes, if I'm interested in a job or a company, I will literally go on LinkedIn. I will look up the company and I will see if I have any first connections. And then I'll also, if I don't have any first connections, I will look at second connections and I will ask them, hey, I know you through one of my lab mates. Would you be willing to tell me more about your experience? And sometimes it'll happen just casually over LinkedIn chat. It's very, very, very casual and informal. Other times you can send somebody an email. So let's say the person for Northrop Grumman, for example, comes to give a presentation, they'll usually give their contact information, and you can follow up with an email and say, I'm really interested in your program, but I would like to learn more. Would you be willing to meet with me for 15 minutes so I can, learn more about your experiences with that company? You just straight up ask for it. And most of the time, I think people are willing, or they can point you to some resources or somebody who would also be willing.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I've had more kind of even more informal kind of experiences just with friends, just like catching up, like, hey, how you graduated 3 years ago? How's life been? Like, how's working at Intel? Like, what's the day to day like? And it can be just as informal as texting. And then you can even ask, right? Can you put me in contact with somebody in a specific position? I would love to just have a conversation with them.
Yes. So yeah, informational interviews happen in so many ways, and sometimes you don't even know what's happening, but they're awesome when they do. But once you kind of have your sights set on, where you want to apply, jobs you like, apply. The engineering job cycles for internships and full-time jobs really are centered around October through January. So if I'm gonna graduate, let's say you're going to graduate sometime in 2021, then we're actually kind of past the job hunt. But that doesn't mean that the jobs aren't out there and you shouldn't apply. I just put the timeline so that you can be vaguely aware of what people are looking for. Audrey touched on this before. You got to tailor your CV or your resume to the job posting. A lot of people down in that bottom right, you can kind of see that a lot of people do get screened out before they ever even make it to an interview. And that's a lot of time because it's a software filter, because the first barrier, the first point of contact is someone in HR who maybe doesn't know how translatable one skill is to another. Do take time to write a good cover letter. I know sometimes they feel like a little antiquated, but you want to make sure that you really drive home the interest. And I think it's an opportunity to talk about not only why you're interested in the job, but why the company should hire you and should invite you to apply with them. And then again, you can use your network. Actually, a lot of jobs, it turns out, like some on Forbes, it says 80% of jobs don't even get posted online. I think that's a huge, crazy number. So I don't know, don't quote me on that. But if you use your network to see if anyone is associated with the company you're in, then you can kind of get some of that insider scoop. So you can kind of find out, oh yeah, they're on a hiring freeze. Or if you're really lucky, someone will say, oh, we're trying to hire a mechanical engineer to help do let's say F-35 simulations, and to build these simulations. Here's the job posting to apply to. When you do it, let me know. I'll push your resume. The network kind of, you can get a lot of insider information from your network and also find out about jobs that don't even get posted from your network. And then top right, I just wanted to show you that from TalentWorks, they are a science-based, they just collected tons of data really on job hunting. And pretty much if you have 50% match of skills, then apply, just send it, apply and see how it goes. The worst thing they're going to say is no. And then you can figure out why, or it wasn't a good fit or something like that.
Yeah, just to maybe comment on that, don't ever really feel like you are underqualified for a position. Don't let that deter you from applying, because I think it's still a good opportunity.
Yeah, I think another scary thing I saw was that like only, I think it's like 10 to 20% of people get the interview. So if you don't get an interview, it's not really that you weren't qualified or that there's anything wrong with you per se. It's just something got screened out. And don't let the denials, steer you wrong. I mean, I got denied from plenty of jobs, but it doesn't mean that I'm not qualified. It means that it just wasn't a fit. Once you've applied, though, this is where things start to get tricky. And I see there's a comment in the chat about, finding a job almost feels like a full-time job. And that's kind of true. So what I would do is I actually would just designate days and sort of schedule my research and my progress in other parts of my life around just like, okay, Fridays after 3 p.m., that's my dedicated job search time. There are statistics on applying at certain times of day. Like if you apply before 10 a.m., you're more likely to get an interview. But, that doesn't mean that I can't go and look at the company, its projects, see what my network looks like there, and kind of figuring out how to tailor my resume and write a CV. And one thing that really helped me deal with it was keeping track of my progress. So I would put, this is a little bit of an example of what I have. I write down the company, the position that I'm interested in. Sometimes like I applied to multiple positions actually at General Atomics. They were all like material scientist, mechanical engineer, and things like that. When I applied, if I followed up, sometimes, you might feel like you're bugging HR, but I think if it's a week after the job posting closes and you're really excited about the job, there's no harm in letting HR know that you're excited about it, because HR they do have to screen out like tens, if not hundreds, if not in some cases thousands of people that could set you apart. But if you do have someone who recommends you, like who submits to your resume or who's pushing your resume, you want to let them know, hey, the job just closed and I was able to get my stuff in on time, stuff like that. But when you're applying to multiple jobs, it's helpful to keep track of this, because then when I get an email from somebody named Raina, right, I know that it's General Atomics. And I would always take notes on my interactions. In some of my interviews, actually, I adopted this thing where I bring my own notes to the interview, so that, as I'm learning new information about the company, I can also retain that while also giving my best interview. And then again, you have your online resources where you can kind of see, you can say, okay, General Atomics has a material scientist job. What kinds of research are people in that field doing? What kind of materials are they looking at? And then you just keep track of your interview date, your points of contact, and also the final decisions. It's good to know, good to keep track of. Audrey?
Yes. So I actually wasn't as maybe formal in keeping track of my progress, but I do think that this is really good advice. And maybe to kind of come back to that question of how do you make the rejections not demoralize you? Yeah, that's a really, really tough one. And I will almost kind of say that I feel like grad school just kind of overall is so demoralizing that you're kind of just used to rejection kind of at this point. I don't know, maybe that's how I was feeling. But just knowing that um, you've made it this far, you are a graduate student at UCSD, like you have employable skills, you have an employable skill set, and You will get hired. It's just kind of about how much time it really takes in order to kind of make that a success. But it is going to happen at some point. I think sometimes people might limit themselves to a specific area or a specific kind of job position. And the best way to really make yourself super marketable is to have this willingness to kind of change, move somewhere that you didn't really think you were going to move to, do a job that you didn't really think that you were going to do, just to kind of get your foot in the door in a sense, right? So, I mean, this job that I have accepted is not necessarily in the position I wanted to be in. You know, I'm not going to be in San Diego anymore. Um, it's not something I could see myself doing for the rest of my life, but it was a good opportunity for the time. So I think, you know, just really branching out and applying to a whole bunch of different places and not limiting yourself can really help. And then of course, just knowing that you've really made it this far, you are more than likely a very good candidate, and that you just have to find a position that will work with you.
Yes, I also share the sentiment with the same sentiment as Audrey, where like grad school has just kicked me enough times that it doesn't really bother me to get rejected anymore, because you know it happens, and it's nothing personal against me. It's just something didn't click, and even though I know I've poured a ton of time and energy into it, um it kind of is what it is. The other thing is, maybe you didn't get one. You can always reach out to HR and say like, "Hey, what happened? I'm so excited about this job. I really want to understand what it would take for me to get the interview." That's a little bit more. It's you kind of have to put yourself out there in that way, but I kind of stopped trying to dwell on the rejection, and if I get rejected, it's okay, because I kind of have this sense of, I don't know, like what's going to happen next is going to fit into my 5-year plan, right? So just because I'm not in the job that I want to be in forever, I never saw myself. I'm joining a rotational program. Actually, I never saw myself wanting to join a rotational program, but after kind of weighing my options, I realized that this helps me get to where I want to be in the next 5 years, whereas everything else just felt like it didn't work. And the places I got rejected from, I'm kind of glad I got rejected from them, because I don't think I would have put the same, you know, once I got into this hiring cycle with Northrop Grumman, I'm not sure it would have been the same. So I also want to acknowledge the question about the job cycle being October to January. It depends on what kinds of jobs you're looking for. So if you're looking for like internships and seasonal kind of hires, especially if you're still not ready to graduate, then there are fewer job openings in that way, but they're not there, if that makes sense. I got an internship that I applied to in like March or April. I landed it like May 31st and started June 16th when I was an undergrad. So don't stress too much and don't stop looking. It's just helpful to be aware that if you want to do any sort of rotational programs, or if you're looking for some very specific experiences, this October to January is generally the time when engineering companies are starting to come to UCSD to do seminars. The recruiters are around, but the jobs are still there. So don't not look, don't not apply, but just know, you know, if you're trying to graduate in 2022, then when October rolls around, you want to make sure your CV is up to date, your LinkedIn's looking good and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah, so this is just the general interview structure. Maybe some of you haven't had the opportunity yet, or just kind of looking to start applying for jobs. But typically, once you submit your application and you hear back from somebody, the first step will be the phone interview. So that hasn't really changed in COVID time. But what has really changed is the next steps would usually kind of be an on-site experience, or would be kind of a video, well, nowadays will be a video conference. And that's usually followed by a technical talk. And then you could have multiple iterations of these last two steps. So really, I think in the age of COVID is really kind of making yourself stand out and making sure that you are really presenting yourself well, both over the phone and a video interview as well. So these are just generally good tips, right? Because typically you're always going to start off with the phone interview, and yeah, just dress the part. So even if you're in a phone interview, it's really good to kind of just, make sure that you're maybe not in your pajamas, right? Like get it ready. Look at yourself in the mirror, right? Like if you are smiling and you're having like a really good time, that can really come across in your voice, even if you aren't seeing that person face to face. A family member of mine is going through like some hiring processes, and he says that sometimes he gets interviews where people don't even put on their phone or their video camera on. So he says that regardless of whatever the potential of this applicant, like not being able to see somebody on a video conference interview, is that could be a pretty big red flag. So make sure you have a workable camera and a non-distracting background. And just generally, people want to work with somebody, or they'll want to hire someone that they could see themselves working with, right? So make sure you're having fun and that this interview process is exciting for you. You're excited about the job, because that can really leverage itself in many ways, right? Um, Interviews are really question based, right? So be prepared. I think the next slide will talk a little bit more about that. But avoid rambling, right? So make sure you have a general idea of what questions are going to be asked, and then have good responses for that. And if the interview ever wants to know anything more about what you've said, they will ask you. So don't feel like you have to kind of word vomit all of this stuff and, keep everything going. And then the technical talk. Yeah, so this is pretty big for, recently graduating PhD students. And really what they're kind of gauging here is just kind of how well can you communicate complex ideas, right? Because communication is really key in a lot of these graduate level positions. So make sure that your talk is general. Make sure that you aren't getting bogged down in the minutia of your research, and also really adhere just to the time frame allowed. Don't go over time, right? And just be really respectful of the fact that people are taking time out of their workday to come to your technical talk. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about the general kind of interview structure.
Give it a second. I know there's more. We have lots more, another slide on interviews and stuff. So we can move
Yeah,
on.
if not, we can answer in the end.
Yeah. Whenever if you have any more questions, we're here for you. So one thing I love the kind of going through the process of the interview, and I think every point that Audrey makes is like, oh, well, duh, spot on, of course. When I read that, I'm like, oh, I should have put that. But can you give more? Sorry, I just saw the question. Audrey, do you want to talk about your technical talk?
Yes. So they'll kind of give you a general prompt, right? And the prompt was just 60-minute presentation on your research, right? So for that, I actually just kind of gave a really high level overview of my Senate exam. So just making sure that I introduced the topic, I introduced the motivations and the aims of my research, I described how I performed my research, and then I kind of gave it a conclusion. What did I learn from my research? So just kind of knowing that, I mean, your research is probably super specific. There's probably hardly any industries out there that are directly related to your research or know the background of your research. So that's also really important, is just kind of making sure that everyone just has a solid understanding of what you did, what were your main goals, and what you accomplished, and why those things were important. I hope that kind of answers the general idea of technical talk.
Yeah, I think it's good to kind of make sure you can talk about it to a lay audience. In my interview process, I did not have a technical talk. I had a group design project with I think it was like 5 to 6 other candidates. So we're all competing for this job. It was pretty interesting. And the project was to design a product that captures, that brings in a component of each of our expertise. And I think we had 2.5 hours to design our product and come up with a presentation of our product. So it was a little bit daunting at first, but and I think this is more towards like these types of maybe rotational programs or like leadership things where they're specifically evaluating a certain criteria for you. But regardless, I mean, they do take notes, they do watch, they do evaluate you based on this design project. And it's a little daunting, but if you go in with a level head and kind of think about what, how you like to conduct your group project or how you like to do a design project, you'll be totally fine. I know in another interview process a friend of mine went through, they were applying at Apple, and Apple gave them an independent problem, and they were like, get this back to us in a week. So these technical things come up in a myriad of ways, and the key is really to be calm and just try your best. You're an expert, you're smart, you're totally smart if you've gotten this far. I can guarantee every single person here is smart for sure. I realized I have this like nice little center bit about the technical questions, presentations, and projects. And I think we've really talked about that a lot. One thing that really sticks out to me are the personality and the interview questions. I put 3 examples, like what's your greatest personal strength? What are some examples? Why do you want this job? Why industry and not academia? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? To be honest with you, I sat in my house and I talked myself through those questions over and over again, just to make sure that when they ask, I can kind of have an idea of what I want to say, but I'm not rehearsing, right? I'm not like I'm not reading a script of where I see myself in 5 years. I've just thought about it and talked about it enough that I can get excited, and that comes across in your interview. There's also, go ahead, Audrey.
Oh, yeah. So I was just going to say, just kind of jumping off of that point, is really make sure you have a lot of examples prepared. Like you might have one situation that is really kind of telling, was super challenging for you, but you don't want to talk about that one situation for every example. So have multiple examples ready about what you've done in your research, what you've done. I mean, even there can be kind of other examples, but make sure, and so actually I'm doing a bad job of this, right? But have specific examples ready that you can kind of speak to on all of these very general personality based questions.
I think another good thing is, like, if you can't think of your example on the fly, like take a deep breath and just think for a second. Like, don't feel like you have to start talking as soon as they're done talking, right? If you don't know, because you can't predict, every single thing that they're going to ask you, just kind of chill out for 1 second and maybe like inhale, exhale, and then start talking. Give your brain a little bit of time to process the question. The last little part of the interview is kind of make sure you're building rapport, right? Like, you want to ask questions, and I encourage you to think of questions to ask them. Think of questions, that you're not going to find on a Google search. And it can be anything. I mean, it can be about their experience too. What's been your favorite part of this job? But if you build rapport with people, it comes back to what Audrey was talking about with likability and whether or not, people can see themselves working with you. I also suggest you align your goals with company goals and resources. One example I saw is like, in 5 years, I want to be a technical manager, or in 5 years, I want to be an expert at finite element analysis. And I know you all have this 8-week training program that I'm really excited about. That kind of helps you build rapport, to build the bridge where it's like, I'm a good fit for not only this one job, but like for the job or for the company itself. And it helps them feel invested in you.
Yeah, so I have a few more kind of hints, mostly for the technical side, but something that I found really helpful was Glassdoor. There's a whole kind of topic about what position and what company, and then people will post what interview questions that they received there. So it's really great to just go through those questions and then kind of give an interview to yourself, right? Read the question and then create a response, right? Something else that I thought was really huge was really know your resume. Like, know your resume to a T and know beyond kind of the general scope of your resume as well. So just one general example was that, material science SEM is pretty big, right? So that's on my resume. And I actually got a question saying, how does an SEM work, right? So that's not something that I do every day. I don't exactly know all the lenses and the apertures and everything. But if you put something on your resume, be prepared to talk about it, and be prepared to talk about it extensively. Yeah. So if you put SEM, XRD, any type of experimental method on your resume, be able to explain it.
I think the other part is like taking ownership over it. Like when people are like, what's your experience with C programming? I tell them straight up, I'm pretty comfortable with C for the most part, I think, but I've never been formally trained in it. And I use it to, on the back end of this code that I use to do my own simulations. And being forthcoming about that, I feel like it's just the right ethical thing to do. You don't want to mislead them and be like, I'm a C expert. And then when you start the job, they're like, we need a C expert. And you totally, mess things up. I think if you're honest and you're like, but I'm really interested in learning more, I really want to use this in a job, then, and share that you're excited about it. It's okay. It's okay. You don't need to be 100% expert. Even Audrey, she didn't know like every aperture of the SEM. It makes me cringe. I remember a picture, like the diagram of it. Don't stress, just be honest and, make it clear that you're ready to learn more as much as this job needs you to. I know we're bumping up on time, so I just wanted to see how many slides, and this is kind of our last slide. So when you get the offer, you definitely want to make sure you're asking questions still. You want to follow up with your HR point of contact as much as you need. So if you need something, they're there to help you. That is their job, and they're happy to help you. You do want to take the time, look at the benefits, look at the healthcare, the plans, relocation. Don't be afraid to negotiate. Ask for more salary if you think you're worth more. If they have a timeline for you, make sure that you're communicating a lot. I know with defense dates, for some people, it's totally up in the air, but like, don't be afraid to say, hey, I'm having a hard time trying to submit this paper before I graduate. I don't think I'm going to start. I need to push back. It's okay. If you're a research-based degree, and they hire research-based degrees, they know you won't be the first person who's had this issue. And then the last thing when you accept your offer is just kind of be mindful of the timeliness of your actions. If you need like some sort of special access, you want to make sure that you're timely in responding and within their time limits, just to make sure that you can be ready to start the job when you're ready to start the job, or when they need you, or whatever it works out to be. But make sure that you communicate if there's something with your timeline that's not working out. Say, hey, I need another week to do this. I need a little bit more time to give you this paperwork. It's no big deal, but you want to be forthcoming and honest about it, just to make sure that you're starting off on the right foot. Audrey?
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. One kind of thing that I've seen done before too is after you have an interview, thank everyone for taking the time to interview you. Specifically for Intel, I think I met with like 8 people that day. So you want to make sure that you are, just, being a really nice person and just thanking them for their time. And it's a good way to have them remember you, right? So it doesn't hurt to follow up after an interview.
Yeah, definitely follow up. Lots of thank yous. Building that rapport really does pay off. I had 4 interviews, 2.5-hour group project, and an hour of presentation, and they gave us a lunch break. And I hung out in my job interview just in my Zoom for the lunch break with all the managers were still in there. So making sure that they see you, building the rapport really does matter. There's a couple questions in the chat. The first is if this is applicable for postdocs. I think so. I mean, I think, obviously your experience is a little bit more, you probably have more experience for sure than we do as just PhD candidates, but don't be afraid. And I in some of the industry jobs, I would venture to say that, you know, you have a PhD plus 2 years of experience, probably. So it's pretty good deal, I think. The other question was if the base salary offers seem to have gone down. I can't speak to that, but I was pretty satisfied with the offer that I got from Northrop Grumman. And I think for the most part, if places, that's a good question to ask. Are they going to stay in person or are they going to stay work from home? Are they going to be in person, and sort of what the benefits are of working from home? But unfortunately, I don't know offhand.
Yeah, so I was actually pretty lucky that I knew somebody in the same position in the same, UCSD material science and engineering, and we got offered the same base salary. So I don't think that the work from home situation has affected that too much for my case.
Well, that brings us to the end, and we have a few minutes left. So any questions that you have, I'm honored that I already to see positive feedback. I'm really hoping that you have an awesome job hunt adventure. Don't be scared. It's going to be fine. You know, it seems scary and daunting, but if you got through a PhD and a postdoc, I think you're awesome and you can do this. But yeah.
Thank you again to Rachel and Audrey for presenting on really important information given COVID. And I know given its winter quarter, people are starting to think about what's next in terms of that job hunt. As a reminder, this session was recorded, so it will be on our Idea Center YouTube channel if there are pieces you would like to go back and listen to. In the meantime, thank you both again, and thank you all for coming.
Thanks.
I will go ahead and log us off. Thank you again. Bye.